So first, I want to invite Helen Raleigh. If you do not know Helen, you probably recognize her. She's on Fox News a lot. Feel free to come on up, Helen. She's a wealth management expert. She was born and raised in communist China. She's the author of several books and a senior contributor at The Federalist. If you do not read her articles, you should. Federalist is great. They are the ones that will publish articles that others are leery to do. It's a wonderful publication. Her writings have also appeared in the Wall Street Journal, City Journal, Fox News, National Review, Newsweek, etc. And I've had the privilege of having Helen on my radio show several times before and always get amazing responses. So, test. There we go. We figured it out. Isn't it amazing? Helen Raleigh. Let's welcome Helen.
Thank you.
Great. So what I always want to start with is the personal story, because this is what makes Helen such a wonderful extrovert about this, because Helen, you came to the United States from communist China as a student with only $100 in your pocket, and you were so incredibly successful. Can you tell us briefly your story?
Thank you for bringing it up, Deborah. So I came to the country a little more than 2 decades ago. Actually, I have less than $100 in my pocket, and it was not even all US dollars because China had a very strict currency control. So it took my brother, he was working at a hotel in China, that he had to secretly change money under the table with foreign guests, like some of you. So yeah, my pockets were US dollars, Australian coins, etc. My family, like Deborah said, I was born and raised in China, and my family experienced horrific hardship, like millions of Chinese people under communism. I wrote their stories in my first book, Confucius Never Said. I brought a few copies over there. But I'm immensely grateful for this country, because as someone who came here with less than $100 in the pocket, and today I manage my own business, I'm a successful writer and a speaker, I'm doing amazing things that I will never be able to do, whether then or now in China. So I am immensely grateful for this country. The reason I read and write and speak, I should say, in addition to my business, is because I dearly love this country, and I grew up in a one-party state, so I do not want to see America, especially Colorado, experience the horror of a one-party state. So I'll leave it there.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. We're going to talk, obviously, we're going to get to tariffs at the end, because it's a very big thing that is happening. But I want to talk about a few other things. It's amazing America's memory is short. It wasn't that long ago that there was a big balloon flying across our missile sites up in the Northern Hemisphere, and we hear about the Chinese police stations that are here, etc. When I was at the border, we learned about all of these folks coming from China. Can you talk a little bit about what we may or may not know about the threat of China right here on our soil?
Definitely. So there are multiple levels of the threat. We can save the economic ones later, but let me just talk about the cyber, which is a really big one. So the cyber threat, let me just give you a quick example. Late last year, right before the Biden administration was on their way out, they held a secret high-level meeting with the Chinese diplomats in Germany. And it was for the first time, because the Chinese diplomat know the administration is on their way out, it was the first time the Chinese diplomat admitted that China's government-sponsored hackers had been lurking in U.S. The critical infrastructure system, like water, gas, except like electricity, etc., for months, if not years. And I don't know if you guys remember, a couple of years ago, we had this huge pipeline. The system broke down for the pipeline in the East Coast. Like people had to, for the first time since the 70s, have to take a bucket to go to the gas station. And that would turn out the Chinese state-sponsored hacker was behind in it. And the reason they're doing this, so first of all, we have some of the veterans here, so the rule of engagement during war is there are military target and there are civilian target. Normally, you do not go, unless you are in war, you do not go after civilian target, right? You only go for military target. So when you go after civilian target, that's almost like a declaration of war, right? So when the U.S. side was confronting the Chinese states, again, this is state-sponsored hackers with the Chinese official to say, why are you lurking our infrastructure? These are civilian targets. And the Chinese side basically say, we make no distinctions. And the reason the minute they're doing this, it's a level, it's a threat. Basically say, if you're doing, for example, if China invades Taiwan, and if the U.S. is a big question mark whether the U.S. is going to intervene or not. But basically, Chinese government want the U.S. government to know that hey, we're behind your infrastructures, right? So if you're going to intervene, you are going to get attacked here domestically. So that's just one level of threat. Another level of threat, probably more targeted to ethnic Chinese like me, is the illegal policing. You all heard the stories about the Chinese government set up police stations, at least in 6 different cities in the United States. Worldwide, they set up over 100 worldwide. So this is mostly targeted at the ethnic Chinese because to the Chinese government, we are always their subjects. It doesn't matter our immigration status, our political, ideology. They always treat us as if we're their subjects. So they use those police stations to help control both the propaganda as well as our right of speech. So some of us get threats, both verbally and like electronically, because we're speaking up. So that's another level of threat. But if they can do this to ethnic Chinese, it's basically the infrastructure is there, right? So it doesn't take them very long to expand this to other areas as well. So those just 2 examples.
That's a great input. There's just some recent headlines of, I think there's one Chinese spy who was known as Sushi something. He was a known Chinese spy. He was put out of the country, allowed back in again. There are some students that are not being allowed in again now from China because they know that they have been told they have to basically spy. Under the Biden administration, we had the balloon with nothing happening. We had many other things that never were cracked down on. Do you see a change happening to begin to address these threats on our own soil under the Trump's second administration?
Well, I definitely see actions from the Congress. So there are multiple bills out there. Some of them I like better than others. For example, Senator Tom Cotton, he wrote out a bill. Actually, he had this bill last year, and then he just reissued the sponsored same bill again. Basically, it's about the policing issues I just mentioned, because he said, United States is a sovereign country, right? Like United States and China does not have extradition treaties, so we should not allow China to establish police station on our soil illegally. That's violate our sovereignty. If, for example, if Helen is a criminal, let the DOJ charge me, but we should not allow the Communist Party set up police station, to intimidate China, U.S. citizens. So that's a bill I really like. I want to address the spy issue because there is another bill I do not like. Basically, that bill is sponsored by a first-term Republican congressman from West Virginia. And he basically said we should stop issuing student visas to all Chinese students going forward. And I found that problematic. Here is why. I was on a student visa, and I love this country. And I know many Chinese students love this country. And come here to study usually is the only way for us to get out of China. And it's actually become harder. And even the people who cross the border illegally, the Chinese nationals, I do not believe all of them are coming here on a mission to spy on behalf of CCP. China's economy has been on a downward spiral, which we'll talk later about the chance for winning the trade war. But China's economy has been on a downward spiral, especially since COVID pandemic. Their self-imposed zero COVID lockdown for 3 years. For 3 years, that decimated China's economy. They never fully recovered from that. The youth unemployment rate is high, so people they try to find all kinds of ways to leave China. So that's why I think we can, as Americans, right, we do not punish people collectively because of identity politics, right? So we always believe in due process. Somebody is always innocent until proved guilty. So I'm always for that the universities and U.S. government can work closely, should work closely to vet, Chinese students' applicants better. And and I think the Trump administration is stepping up, revoke visas for people who commit crime, and I do support that. But I don't think we do not issue blanket denial or ban just because they're coming from China. Because as we talk about the trade war, U.S. and China are engaged in this great power competition. This great power competition is going to determine, whoever come out of the winner, is going to determine the long-term prosperity as well as national security. And to win this great power competition, it's going to rely on brain power, right? It's a huge win for us if we can cause brain drain in China. But when we have bills like this, because even a bill has a little chance to get passed, but when the headline everywhere reports as, oh, the GOP is banning all future, Chinese students, that sent the wrong message. And we have been, as long-term Republicans, we have been fighting this, narrative forever. I was out there speaking and writing to say the GOP is not racist. We do not believe, we do not judge people simply by external identity, right? But then you have a bill like this, it's very difficult to defend. I actually wrote an article about it, and the Federalist, I thanked them for publishing that. It's under the archive. So, but I just think we need to be smarter. We need to be smarter. On the one hand, we should be vigilant. We should defend our national security. We should catch spies and deport them or punish them, whatever. At the same time, we do not impose collective punishment just because somebody look different than us. And I even had people ask me in the audience, not this audience, but other audience ask me out blank, are you a spy? Like how do I said if I say no, you're gonna say, of course, all spies saying that, right? I said I'm not even gonna dignify that question. So please do not ask me that.
That is not one of the questions I have written.
Thank you.
I think that's fascinating because I think we can just start with the fact that under the previous administration, there were people that were caught, like the sushi chef I'm talking about, who was caught spying. There were students that were caught taking photos right next to our missile base. I mean, that's where we need to start. And so I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I remember when I had you on the show when we talked about what was happening after COVID, that caused an uprising. Has that settled down, or is that destabilization still happening within China after that wake-up call for some who were even, by the way, welded into their apartment buildings and not allowed to leave?
Right, so it's just a contrast. I remember when I was growing up, that I grew up with food rations, right? The government determined how much food each person can have on a monthly basis. Like meat is measured by ounces. Rice was measured by pound. It's never like something like you can feel full. And those are what kind of experience the kids, young people nowadays in China prior to COVID, they were never familiar with, because the Chinese history book wiped out that part of the history clean. Their grandparents and parents' generation choose not to talk about it. And so the young people in China before COVID, they grew up with this prosperity in China. So they think, oh yeah, it's okay to have a little less freedom, right? As long as we go have good jobs and we all get to play the same video games, drive the fancy cars, whatever. But the COVID really broke that, because a brutal COVID enforcement policy, we think we got it bad. Chinese people got it really bad, especially for young people. Not only they have, because they got locked in the dorms and there was not enough food, and even like I mentioned that even they go to bathroom, they have to apply, inform the group leaders in order for them to go to the bathroom. They're not allowed to take a shower. But worst of all is because China's economy really tanked, right? So all those businesses were shut down, so they couldn't find jobs. there's a unwritten social contract between the Communist Party and the Chinese people after Mao died, after Cultural Revolution was ended. Basically, even though it's not written anywhere, but everybody understood it, that the government is supposed to deliver prosperity, jobs, growing economy. In exchange, people will remain like no rebellions, like they will tolerate the one party, rule. They will tolerate there's never going to be an election. You can't hold anybody, any politician accountable. So they will tolerate that. But COVID totally changed that. So it's really the Communist Party's self-inflicted wound. And so after the white paper protest basically ended the COVID lockdown, because young people, they just hold a piece of white paper because they can't really write anything on there, right? Because of the speech censor. So that really led to abrupt the government end the 3-year COVID lockdown. And so now the protest is more passive. Like I said, people try to find all kinds of ways to leave China any way they can. That's why we see a growing illegal Chinese immigrants everywhere, not just United States, but anywhere they can, anywhere they can get out. But for those who cannot leave, do not have any means to leave, young people now, they have one of the popular terms among the Gen Zs is lying down. What does lying down mean? Lying down means make no effort. Don't try anything. Just barely minimum get by. So they're not getting married, which is a huge deal in a very traditional culture, especially if you're a boy. Like you're supposed to carry the family's name to the next generation, right? So they are not getting married. They are taking the minimum paying jobs. Like they're not trying very hard, and so that's their passive way. So it's reached such a level. The government actually have to, the propaganda department actually have to create the movies and create the songs to encourage people to say, no, it's really not that bad. You should get married. You should try harder. You should learn to eat bitterness. That's what they told us, told my generation. Now they're trying to pass out to this generation to say, learn to eat bitterness. But you can't tell kids grow up with prosperity now to learn to eat bitterness. They don't know what that means. Anyway.
That's fascinating that is what is happening. I remember being in Soviet Union, and there was no food, or if you went to a place, people would just walk out, because when you take away the natural incentive, which is you earn from your labor, then why do anything? And so that's going to hurt the economy even more. I want to make sure we get to the terror portion, because what you just shared is, I think, really important, because most of us don't know. We see China as this juggernaut, certainly has been very aggressive on the international stage. We are in a trade deficit with them. But let's talk about their economy and this trade war now. From what you're saying, the economy is actually pretty fragile.
Right.
We know that President Trump, who is the ultimate deal maker, threatened everybody. Then he pulled back from 100 countries who are now coming to the table. But when he brought that down to 10%, he went to 125% on China. And by the way, Helen has a great article in the Federalist about this, if you want to read it. And I do want to make a shout out. She has her books over there, $20. Definitely get them. They're amazing. Let's talk about the tariff trade war now. Give us a perspective on your thoughts about this, because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, it's going to hurt all Americans. What do you think is going to be accomplished, and how may this play out?
Right, so I think the real premises is the trade war is not just about trade. That's what we first and foremost need to establish that. And what Trump was trying to do is to basically reorient not just the trade system, but he really tries to rebuild America, both from economic standpoint as well as from national security standpoint. Let me just give you an example. Our economy are so dependent on China. In my article, I mentioned that a quick example is we cannot build ammunition without the China supply, or China and to a lesser extent Russia supply of certain minerals, right? And also, one of the China's retaliation to U.S. tariff was China stopped exporting rare earth minerals. You probably heard of rare earth minerals, the term quite often. Rare earth minerals basically are the minerals who build the 21st century, right? All our phones, our laptop and EV vehicles, even our military missiles, intercontinental missiles, everything runs on rare earth mineral. But guess what? We have them in Wyoming, but our rules and regulations preventing us from developing them. So but China has that. So this whole it's called a trade war, but it's really not just about trade. But I do wish, I do have my reservation. I wish Trump's doing it a little bit differently, a little bit different order, not everything everywhere at once. But he's already started. So how is this going to end? I think it's going to end still with a negotiation. You look at what happened during Trump's first term, and similar things happen. So there are some differences, but there are some similarities. The differences is during Trump's first term, his trade war was really targeted at China. He did not go out with everybody else, and the China's response initially was the same, right? Trump said, I'm going to impose 10% tariff on 50 billion of your export. China said, I'm going to do 10% on your 50 billion. And so they went back and forth several times. But very quickly, China ran out of American goods to impose tariff on because, again, we're running a huge deficit. So that's so the whole back and forth went into 2018, and then China came back to the table. End of 2018, so let's talk. So they negotiated a deal. Unfortunately, the deal was never materialized because what happened? We had COVID, and then Trump was out of office. So this time, I think that China is doing the same thing again, the tough talk. But also, it's not all just tough talk because since that experience, China has been prepared itself. So China's economic dependence on exporting is coming down. But by how much is debatable because the government number said, oh yeah, we come down quite a bit. It used to be 30% of GDP, now it's 20%. But they never count the transshipment. Transshipment basically means, Chinese companies set up factories in Vietnam, right? And they still hire only Chinese workers. They still use China to produce the raw material, and they still send them basically made in China goods. But it's exported from Vietnam. So the Chinese government does not count that as China's exports. But if we count that, we should. And then it means China's economy is still dependent on export more than, especially now with the economy in the weak state. So China will have to come to the table. And I think I already see signs that China is waiting to talk because most recently after Trump raised the tariff at 125 and China countered it, but they issued a statement to say, we're not going to raise it anymore because it's meaningless after 125. So even though it sounds like a mockery, but I think it's also their signal to say, hey, enough is enough, let's talk. So I think that it will come down to negotiation. How this negotiation going to turn out really depends on one thing. Depends on Trump. Depends on whether he wants a quick win or he's aiming for legacy. So we can talk that more if we have time later.
Yeah, and you brought up a point. One of the things that Helen talks about in her articles are 3 lessons from the last time, and making sure that in this negotiation, it also has to do with cybersecurity, because you talked about how the intellectual property theft from the United States is one of the biggest, China taking from the United States is one of the biggest shifts in wealth. They have taken so much from us. I think we're going to pause here in just a moment. When I see if there's anything else you want to add, we're going to bring Rich up in a moment, and then we will have time for questions at the end. But I do think it's interesting to note the China economy is not nearly as strong as it may seem, and they do need us. You pointed out in the article, they need our market, and so it will hopefully lead quickly to some kind of a negotiation. Any last thing you want to share before we?
Yeah, people always ask me, so how do we win this?
Yes.
I said that we win this by stick to our strengths, which is free market principles and our founding principle. Those are our winning ticket. Because if you look at throughout the history, we are the only ones who created both the prosperity and the security, not only for us, but also for the rest of the world. That's really, the communism, they may temporarily generate the prosperities, but it's never long last. So that's what I want to say.
And I do have one last question, because you bring up a great point. One of our greatest national security issues is that we can't build anything anymore. I mean, last week Jonathan and I were at the World War II Museum, and you think about after Pearl Harbor, when our entire Pacific fleet was destroyed, they rebuilt it in a matter of months. Whereas at the Pearl Harbor Museum, the landing pad to go onto the Arizona got bumped by a transport. It was out of commission for about 5 years. They couldn't rebuild it. So until we bring that stuff back here, last question, do you see a movement in America, because there's a huge opportunity in Wyoming, etc. Do you see a movement in America to respond to this, to begin to start our manufacturing and accessing our minerals, etc.?
Absolutely. I think that's why during Trump's supposedly State of Union, he didn't call it State of Union address, he mentioned that he's going to establish a shipbuilding office in the White House. And actually, I wrote an article the next day. I said that's exactly what we need. And because China, so after Second World War, United States was dominating both commercial, shipping, maritime shipping, as well as we have the world's largest navy. Not anymore. Today, China's dominated the worldwide commercial shipping, as well as China has the world's largest navy, based on the number of ships. And U.S. military estimate China can build ships twice as faster than us and much, cheaper than us. Why this matters? Imagine if China invades Taiwan, we're gonna intervene, right? I always refer to, you look at what happened with Russia-Ukraine war. It doesn't matter you're fighting a war in 1945 or in 2024. War is fighting on attrition. One of the main reasons United States-led ally won the Second World War, besides the greatest generation sacrifice, is we were able to outproduce all our enemies, the industrial production. We can quickly replace, ammunitions, supplies, even food, to support our soldiers in the front line. We totally lost the ability, and I think that's why it worries Trump so much, that he's willing to take a very high risk approach. Again, it is very high risk. I really pray he's going to be successful, because if not, the consequences are unthinkable. But that's the kind of strategic industry he really wants to either bring back or rebuild here, right? So that's why I think the Democrats, the left, is such a bad faith argument when they say, oh, are we gonna make a t-shirt or sew shoes here? No, who cares about t-shirt and shoes? That's not what he tries to do here. We're talking about the missiles, we're talking about ammunition, we're talking about rare mineral earths, we're talking about what our economies depend on, we're talking about national defense, shipping, we're talking about strategic industry. So it's such a bad faith argument when they talk about t-shirts and shoes. Like, who give a damn?
How do you really feel, Helen? Thank you so much.